My name is Bella. I'm just your average housewife, married for 2 years. Until I turned 27, I had pretty much zero luck in the love department. I went to an all-girls private middle and high school, followed by an all-women's university. After graduating, I worked as a receptionist at a big corporation where, unsurprisingly, all my colleagues were women. In my social circle, it was the norm for people to get invited to parties by business executives, but not for me. I never attended such gatherings. The reason was simple. Whenever I talked to men, I became so nervous that I couldn't even speak. I often received compliments on my appearance and got invited out a few times. I had dinner with some kind-hearted guys, but in the end, they'd say, "You're pretty, but there's not much else to you." Then it happened. My destiny knocked on the door. "Bella, will you go out with me?" That's what Lex, an employee from one of our client companies who always registered at my desk, said to me. People around us speculated we were dating since he would only give his contact info to me. But that wasn't the case. Whenever he tried to engage me in conversation, I just gave polite smiles like I did with everyone else. I truly thought I was destined to be single forever. But then, his confession changed everything. Can we maybe just start off as friends?" Caught off guard, that was my reply. And yet, he nodded so eagerly. It was as if his head would fall off, and he entered the office still smiling. This was a first for me. Until now, it had always been guys with clear, ulterior motives like, "Want to have dinner? Or free tonight?" But with Lex, I sensed no such intentions, just pure affection. I was so thrilled. I went out with him a few times. Though I still nervous and not much of a conversationalist, he accepted me for who I was. And that's when I knew. "Lex, would you like to be in a relationship with me?" He was overjoyed, even to the point of tears. This all happened 2 years ago on Christmas. At that time, I felt extremely happy, thinking I'd be blessed forever with such a loving person. But the crack in the facade came when his company went bankrupt. 2 years later, I am now 29. "Lex, you should probably wake up now." I called to my still sleeping husband, put on my shoes, and leave the house. Right now, I'm the only one bringing in money for our household. My husband's company went under 6 months ago, and he's been jobless ever since. He's been job hunting, but it's been rough. Not only is the economy bad, but his industry is also saturated. Even if he gets an offer, it's often for a take-home salary of just $2,000, making it difficult for him to commit to changing jobs. Despite all this, I continue to support him. Our love isn't so superficial that it would fade just because of unemployment. My salary has always been modest. We've never lived a life of luxury. We reside in a 2-bedroom rental apartment that's over 30 years old. It's not a secure building, and it's a 30-minute walk from the train station. But I was willing to compromise on many things to continue our life together. I suspected my husband still couldn't move on from the shock of his company going bankrupt. He had a few job offers, and I patiently waited, believing he'd find a good match and recover emotionally. But my hope was fleeting, and he continued to deteriorate. He even started taking his stress out on me, sometimes raising his hand in anger. He didn't leave any lasting marks, and I thought he must be suffering more than me. So I endured it, wanting to be supportive. Then a few days later, he finally landed a new job. He gave up on his previous industry and switched to a completely different one. The new place was willing to hire him despite his lack of experience, so he took the job. When he got it, I was relieved, thinking I wouldn't have to be his punching bag anymore. I'd wondered if he was becoming abusive, but it seemed like it was just a phase. Now he's working hard at the new company and even got promoted to team lead. A year has passed since then, and I turned 30. I was thinking about having kids soon. but the loving man I married seemed to have vanished.
Hey, I told you I like toast. Why did you make pancakes? And if you're gonna serve fruit, at least remove the pit.
My husband started getting angry over the smallest things and began saying awful stuff. Really, do you have to speak like that? You're an adult, Lex. Take out the pit yourself, I retorted, losing my patience. He responded by slamming his fist into the wall, intimidating me. I'm not confrontational, but I know instinctively that his behavior is emotional abuse. Lately, I've been careful not to provoke him, but we've been fighting a lot, and I'm emotionally drained. The breaking point for me was when he took it out on me. The pressure of his new job seemed to be the root cause. He got promoted to team leader shortly after proving his worth. Not everyone's telling him he's on the fast track to becoming a department head. Unable to bear this new pressure, he started lashing out at me, the easier target. Actually, I quit my job when I turned 30 to become a housewife. I'd always planned to leave my receptionist job in my 30s to pursue something I truly wanted to do. My husband knew this, so I retired as planned at 30. But it seems he doesn't like it.
In this day and age, women need to work too. I can't support both of us on my salary alone, you know? Do you even appreciate who's providing for you?
He complains while eating, then grabs his bag and leaves for work. When he was jobless, I was the one supporting him. So why am I the one being blamed now? That was when I began to feel distant from him emotionally. One day, I returned home to find unfamiliar shoes at the door. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was lounging in the living room. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing here?" When I approached her, my mom flatly said, "Didn't Lex tell you? I'm moving in here from today." I had never heard anything like this. Later, I found out the reason was that my father-in-law had passed away and my mom-in-law was feeling lonely. So my husband had suggested she moved in. Of course, no one consulted me. As I stood there stunned, mom-in-law ordered me to start making dinner. "A homemaker's worth is proven by serving her family, so get on with it." Confused and frustrated, I went to the kitchen to make dinner anyway. Then as the food was nearly ready, mother-in-law came in and said,
"Lex hates stewed burgers. This is garbage."
She dumped the almost finished dish into the trash. I was sitting inside, but oddly words failed me when I was confronted by this unexpected situation. Unable to speak up, I watched as my mom-in-law caused a scene. And then my mother-in-law started rummaging through the fridge and began cooking without asking. Finally, regaining my composure, I said, "Hold on, Mom. I planned meals for the week and bought groceries accordingly." Just as I said that, he dumped flour on my head. Coughing from the flour, I continued to watch her make her dish and then demand I clean up. My husband eventually came home and was delighted to see the meal.
"Oh yes, this is the kind of food I want. No need for salads. Fried stuff is the best."
Ignoring me, he happily sat down to eat with Mom. At that point, my heart felt like it had been smashed and painted over the black ink. From then on, the daily harassment from mother-in-law and the emotional abuse from my husband continued. I felt there was no place for me in this home. And even though my husband has pressed for intimacy, under the circumstances, I naturally couldn't accept. I had been avoiding getting pregnant, even though I'm already 30, because I don't want a child with this abusive man. Then finally, the last straw broke. My mom-in-law said she was feeling unwell and asked me to drive her to the hospital. I didn't want to spend time with her, but I couldn't just leave her unwell. So I begrudgingly drove her to the hospital. But when I went to pick her up, a social worker called me into a separate room. "You must be having a tough time doing all the housework and childcare alone, but taking it out on your husband and mother-in-law isn't good," she said. Apparently, mother-in-law had been claiming that I caused her bruises from a fall. Worse, she'd been going to the hospital multiple times and had consulted about me every time. It seems she had chosen today to deliver the final blow. The social worker, not knowing the whole story, just blamed me. "You should take better care of children and the elderly." All the while, our family doesn't even have kids. I reached my limit when I was told I might need psychiatric help. I'll sue you for violating my rights. I'm the one being abused here, not the other way around. I showed evidence for my husband's abuses and the burn marks caused deliberately by mom-in-law. The social worker said she'd need to confirm this with mom-in-law, but I refused and left the hospital on my own. Soon after, my mom-in-law and husband returned home. Apparently, mom-in-law told my husband that I'd been mean to her. Shaking my husband said,
"You're parasite leaving of me. How dare you abandon my mother?"
I don't know what kind of story my mom-in-law spun for you, but judging by her fake tears, she lied again. I was tired of correcting her, so I walked out of the house ignoring both of them. That day, I didn't return home and spent the night in a business hotel. Thankfully, I had my wallet and cell phone, and I could easily buy a charger. I decided not to go back home for a while and ignore both of them. But one day I was walking near the house and ran into a woman in her 50s living across from our apartment.
Was getting worried. Haven't seen you around. Also heard from your mom that you and your husband are going on vacation for a week or so.
Hearing that, I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. But then I thought, if not now, when? I immediately contacted a moving company and asked them to help me move out as soon as possible, even if it was a bit more expensive. Luckily, I didn't have much stuff, and the movers arranged to send everything to my parents' house in just 3 days. Let's see how my clueless husband and his mother, who have no idea how much I've contributed to our home, react. They belittle me without knowing anything, and I won't forgive them. I muttered as I faced our empty house, and then I went back to my parents' home. A few days later, my husband called me.
"Hey, Bella, where are you? Your room is empty."
My husband, catching wind of the situation, kept demanding to know where I was. None of your business, I told him. By the way, I've already filed out the divorce papers since you've threatened divorce before. Just sign and submit them. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. And so, a peaceful life began. I woke up, did yoga, prepared breakfast, and sat down at the table with my parents. Lunch with mom and dinner as a family again. I felt so normal, yet it was a comfort and happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. My parents were surprised when they received my things but welcomed me warmly. Things took a turn when my husband found out I was at my parents' and waited for me nearby. I tried to run when I saw him, but he caught up and grabbed my arm.
"Bella, let's go home. The house is a mess without you."
His grip tightened, and I yelled,
Help me!
A high school boy in his sports uniform happened to be passing by and came to my aid, and a nearby businessman called the police. With the police there, my husband retreated quietly. But as expected, my raging mother-in-law stormed into my parents' house.
How dare you humiliate my son in public? What a disgrace you and your family are!
Finally, I held my father back from confronting them and said. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was outside our place, screaming threats and even mentioning defamation lawsuits. My dad was about to lose it and confront her, but I held him back. It's okay, I'm ready to settle this. I called my husband, who noticed the incoming call while next to mother-in-law and boldly said, I know you're cheating, and I have evidence. I'm going to sue you for abuse and get a settlement when we divorce. Hearing this, my husband began to panic. In truth, I had hired a detective to gather evidence after hearing rumors about him going to a hotel with a co-worker. So I had ample evidence of his infidelity. I had even visited a hospital and secured a medical certificate just in case they tried something. I had also recorded conversations to have evidence if needed. I planned to confront my husband and his mother once I felt emotionally ready, but I won't be quiet when they insult my parents. I know my mother-in-law has been taking money from my wallet. Also, ever since I left, I heard the house is in horrible state, even smelling bad. You're getting complaints from the neighbors, aren't you? Hearing this, my husband was at a loss for words. I got this information from a neighbor who told me my husband and his mother were out of town. Apparently, they've been failing at basic chores like sorting the trash, and the house has turned into a dump. Also, I heard there are complaints with the property management about the loud arguments they have daily. So maybe now my husband realizes how much I contributed to our household and wants me to come back. But it's too late. I'm not coming back. Live happily ever after with your beloved mom. After saying this, I hung up the phone. Shortly after, my mom-in-law tried to kick down my front door. I called the police and they were both arrested. I later learned from my neighbor that they hadn't addressed any of the complaints through the management company. Eventually, the drama got so bad that it emptied out the entire apartment complex. The management finally took legal action against both of them, ignoring complaints, not paying rent, and disrupting business. They faced a lawsuit seeking damages. In the end, they were ordered by the court to vacate and pay damages. Now, they're blacklisted in the real estate market, unable to rent anywhere. Turns out, the reason for the unpaid rent was my husband making a costly mistake at work, leading to a pay cut. Unable to find another place in the area, he quit his job and moved far away. And yet again, he hit another roadblock in finding new employment. He ended up homeless, which led his mother to shoplift. She was arrested for injuring a store clerk who confronted her. I found out about this through online news. Beyond that, I don't know and don't want to know. After the divorce, I started working in my dream cafe. I met and became friends with a colleague who is 5 years younger than me. At 34, I remarried. By 40, we opened our own dream cafe, and now I'm pregnant. It's a late life pregnancy, but I've never been happier.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.